It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs, have some fun.
Hello, everybody, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle for the Giants. I am John Schmeelk, joined by Lance Medow in the room where it happens in the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. Yeah, that was for you. Pearson Butler will be stepping out. Pearson Butler tiene que recordar la esquina de los gigantes. There we go. That was a full Spanish sentence for you, Pearson. So at least for the first part of the show, we have a very enthusiastic call stream ready to take your calls at 201-939-4513. Get on the line, give us a call, talk some Giants football. Inside jokes for the first 1 minute. I'm sure you guys love it. Or you don't. I don't care. I enjoyed it. Lance Medow, how are you?
They could understand
nope,
there's a whole other
They have
story.
no idea what I'm talking about,
exactly.
and that's okay. Lance, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, looking forward to getting into the thick of things once again after a rough week one, but I think there's some interesting things to at least delve into as well as some takeaways here moving forward.
Unfortunately, Lance, we have been here before having this conversation. The Giants have lost their home opener every year except twice, dating back to 2012. So the Giants have dealt with this before. We purposely did not talk about this a lot yesterday because Brian Daboll spoke at 1:30 and we didn't have any news on it. But we did find out yesterday that Jackson Dart will remain the backup for the Giants in week number 2. Russell Wilson will remain the starter against the Dallas Cowboys. It's something that Paul and I both thought was going to happen. It's something we both thought should happen. If you go through an entire offseason with the plan and you determine this is your best way forward, just changing that plan after one bad game and what's always a crazy week one in the National Football League is usually not the prudent decision.
I completely agree with you. That's why I was not surprised at all. I would have been more surprised if he would have said Jackson Dart is starting against the Dallas Cowboys.
I was shocked he didn't say after the game that Russell Wilson was starting against the Dallas Cowboys.
I think his point was you get overly emotional sometimes after losses.
And that's fair.
So he didn't want to make any declarative statements, especially since he hadn't watched the film or whatever it may be.
And by the way,
I get it.
And by the way, that makes sense too. I totally get that.
Yeah. So I think that's why he didn't necessarily come out and say, hey, guys, there's nothing to talk about. Russell Wilson is our starter and so forth, which was the definitive statement he made all throughout the offseason. But I want to piggyback off of the point you just made, John. You got to backpedal here and remember, there's a reason they brought Russell Wilson in. That hasn't changed after just one game.
Correct.
They brought him in because he's a proven veteran quarterback, and even if at the time they brought him in, and remember they also added Jameis Winston, which means they really wanted a lot more experience in the room, that whatever was going to transpire through the draft, it doesn't all of a sudden get accelerated simply because you had a bad product in week one. Remember, it's about the long-term growth and development of Jackson Dart. That still remains the number one priority. It's not putting out 28 points next week and thinking that you change the quarterback, that one individual is going to move the team in a different direction. I think anybody, whether you're biased or unbiased, invested in the Giants or not, and you watched the play in the trenches against the Commanders, Russell Wilson is not a statue, okay? Russell Wilson actually has mobility, and he still had a hard time being comfortable enough to survey the field and move on to his second read or whatever it may be. What makes you think that putting a younger, inexperienced quarterback who also has mobility is just going to flip the switch? See,
the only thing that might help is that Dart's a little bit taller, so maybe when he gets some pressure in his face, he can see over those guys a little bit more, but generally speaking, I'm 99.9% of the way with you.
Yeah, and I didn't think that, although the Commanders, they did a great job revamping their defensive front, and they got some big guys, and they were very active, and I think Dan Quinn and company deserve a lot of credit, but it wasn't, to me, I guess through my lens, John, it wasn't Russell Wilson having trouble seeing down the field. It was guys just up in his grill.
I agree.
Immediately, whether it was east, west, north, south, and so forth. But I think a lot of people are also going to bring up what happened when Pat Shurmur was the head coach, if you recall. Okay? And Eli Manning, the change was made relatively early in the season after the 0-2 start and the Daniel Jones, correct, starts against the Bucs. But see, there's a distinct difference between that versus this. And the biggest difference of all, John, is the fact that the skill set of Daniel Jones was very different than Eli Manning. So if Pat Shurmur is saying to himself, the offensive line's not great, we want guys that can extend the play and so forth, Daniel offers you that. My point is, other than youth, newness, excitement, from a skill set position, I don't see a huge disparity at this point between Dart and Wilson where you're going to go in a completely different direction. And that's why I wanted to bring up 2019 in this dialogue.
I think it's a great point. I want to read the quote from Darius Slayton yesterday when he spoke to the media because I thought it was just common sense times 1,000, and I thought it made a lot of sense. All right, here was the question. I'll give you the whole shebang here just so we can
this is a treat
get it
here.
all through.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
I hope you really embody Darius Slayton here as you go through the play-by-play of the transcript.
Should I do a different voice for the
I was going to say, listen,
so it's
whenever
different than
you want
the
to
answer?
take this, you have the freedom and flexibility. The way you set the stage was quite impressive.
Now, I don't know who asked this question, so I'm not trying to imitate a media member. Don't try to get me in trouble for trying to make fun of somebody. So I'm just doing a random voice. I don't know who asked this question. I don't remember
the
from
generic
when I listened
reporter,
to it. Yes.
okay.
I'm sitting here waiting for the call, and you see people, apparently it's a reporter from the 50s, and you see people on TV and all over social just saying, you guys should start quarterback Jackson Dart. What do you think when you hear people say that? Then again, I think actually, now that I remember, I think it was Tom Rock that asked that question. That is nothing like what Tom Rock sounds. Anyway, so here was Darius Slayton's answer. I think that's the natural thing these days in the sport of football, which is unfortunate at all levels of football, even at the college level, the pro level, is that everybody wants new as soon as they think that things aren't going well. But the reality is that things take time and not everything is just a 9-1-1 situation. We have good coaches, we have a good quarterback in Russell Wilson, and it's 1 week. I think in the history of football, if you kind of look at the history of football, it hasn't always served people well to just throw people in the fire, because I know that I wouldn't want to be thrown in the fire like that. Obviously, Jackson believes in himself. He obviously believes he's a good football player. We believe he's a good football player. But at the same time, this league is hard. This league is tough. And you see players get chewed up and spit out all the time by this league, which is something I would never want to happen to him. So as all that goes, like I said, he said, meaning Coach Dable, Russ is our starter for however long, and he's playing, and he's going to play good ball. We're going to play good ball as an offense, and whenever Jackson's time comes, it comes. Thought it was a great answer.
Well, Darius is always somebody who thinks a lot before he answers, and I think provides more insight than maybe other players, not necessarily on this roster, but just if you go around the league. And he's been here, he's experienced a lot of quarterback change and a lot of coaching change. So I think when you go through the battlefields, you gain perspective. But let's go a little bit off topic, but somewhat on a related note. Cam Ward made his first career start for Tennessee against Denver on Sunday, and it didn't necessarily go according to plan, or it wasn't pretty. So who's to say that just because you once again throw in a player under circumstances where, there's not a lot of film, there's newness, but that doesn't mean that everything is going to go in the complete opposite direction of what happened with respect to the Commanders. Plus, you're going up against a Dallas team that, although they did lose their best defensive pass rusher in Micah Parsons, defensive coordinators live to go up against inexperienced quarterbacks, okay? They would sign up for that. If you right now had a conversation with Brian Schottenheimer and Matt Eberflus, John, and you said, if I gave you the Giants offense with Russell Wilson at the controls or the Giants offense with Jackson Dart at the controls, I would go down the hypothetical road and say with confidence, they would rather take a rookie quarterback in his first career start and try to throw exotic different defensive schemes his way than go up against a polished quarterback that has been there and done that. So you got to be careful with what you wish for. And I think Brian Dable also knows that firsthand, having gone through a number of different offenses and quarterbacks. And if you're going to bring up Buffalo, okay, the Josh Allen situation was very different too. This is why history is important, John, to bring up. Allen got in week 1 his rookie year because it was a lopsided affair, and then there were injuries to other quarterbacks in that Buffalo room. So the pathway for him to get on the field changed because of circumstance. Russell Wilson right now is healthy, and it's got nothing to do with him not being 100%. So if that was here, it's a little bit of a different story. But as long as he's fully healthy and can operate the offense, I think it is well extreme to be campaigning for a quarterback change after 4 quarters of football.
Look, there were some good quarterbacks that had bad week ones. All right? Kyler Murray threw for 163 yards. Baker Mayfield threw for 167 yards and only completed 53% of his passes. Now, he had 3 touchdowns, made big plays at the end to win the game. But overall, Lance, if I told you Baker Mayfield 53%, 167 yards, that's not a good game for him.
No, not at all. And he had a revamped offensive line, too, which didn't necessarily help.
Correct. Bo Nix, 176 yards. He did not play well for the Broncos. Trevor Lawrence, 178 yards. C.J. Stroud, 188 yards. Russell Wilson finished with 168 yards. So
Joe Burrow, too, you could have thrown it.
Yeah, I mean, they had negative yards in the fourth, negative 17 yards in the fourth quarter of that game or some ridiculous number like that.
Just killed my fantasy team. That's a whole other thing. You had to do it. I don't know. I was the one that brought it up. So
yeah, that's not my fault.
No, I'm just surprised that you buried the lead, but go ahead.
Clearly, it's on your mind.
Oh, no. Yeah, clearly. I moved on. It's been that quick.
Oh, man. Lance is feeling it. Unfortunately, the stat only ranks the top 25 quarterbacks, so I imagine Burrow is below that.
I was going to say, he didn't even make your screen, which just puts things further in perspective.
Okay, hold on.
And tells you those stories.
I'm going to go from top 25 to top 50 here. Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah, I didn't even mention Tua. 14 to 23, 114 yards. Tua, 14 of 23, 113 yards. J.J. McCarthy, again, made big plays at the end, just 143 yards. Sam Darnold, just 150 yards. Bryce Young was brutal in that game, 154 yards. So a lot of quarterbacks and a lot of offenses looked bad. B-A-D, bad in week number 1. It's not just Russell Wilson. It's not just the Giants. Give them a chance in week number 2. It could go better. Okay? Be patient. See what's going to happen. Before we get to the calls, we're going to have Lance run away. We're going to have Lance.
Really? Where am I running?
No. Pearson's back.
What a relief. Yes.
Thank
the audience was dying to know that.
The show can go on. Well, I'm sure the people that are looking to call in are going to be very. Remember, we had a social media outcry that Pearson was not doing.
We
the show
did.
for
I remember that.
days.
Yes,
so,
about a week and a half
absolutely.
ago. Yeah.
So just give me your thumbnail playing card take on the game. What you think happened? What needs to be better? I mean, I don't think it's rocket science here, but I at least want to give you a chance to kind of give your take before we take calls.
Sure. Well, a few things come to mind, and I'm going to use numbers and statistics to support my cause here. I think the biggest killer of all on offense, and you could say 1-2 turning points, however you want to spin it, was the inability for them to execute in the red zone. I mean, that's the ball game right there, especially since, and I thought that the Commanders, even though their offense left a lot of meat on the bone, by the way, okay?
Jaden Daniels and bad throws.
And Daniels had Terry McLaurin, okay, early in the game, wide open, beat the Giants' defense. That could have been ugly.
Yep.
So with all of that going wrong, you still felt as if, the Commanders were pulling away from the Giants, but the score didn't reflect that. So that's why it puts these red zone plays further under the microscope. And here's the numbers. Here's the way that I interpreted it. 12 red zone plays they had, okay, between those 2 possessions. 10 inside the Washington 10-yard line. I'm not counting the one that was wiped out by an illegal use of the hands penalty against Washington, okay, because that goes down as no play, essentially.
Though it was still an opportunity to score.
It was,
but you could use that
if
you
want, but I'm just, for context purposes, I'm not including that. That's why I go from 12 to 10, and then I'm not including Gano kicking the field goal.
Correct.
Because you're taking your offense off the field. So there were 10 legitimate plays inside the 10-yard line. This is basic math, people, okay? The fact that they weren't able to punch it in is extremely troublesome. And red zone offense has been problematic, John, even before Brian Daboll came to town, okay? This has been an ongoing issue. But the root of the problem is the inability to run the football in those tight spaces. Okay?
I mean, they didn't try to run it much in those tight spaces.
But even in the few times they did,
it did not go well.
It did not go well.
That's correct.
And even if you want to say you want to run the football more, that's fine. That's a fair critique. But the times that they ran, there was no push, John. And there has to be push.
Well, it's been like that way the whole game, no matter where they ran.
True, but I mean, it's of utmost importance
that
you even at least move your body forward. Because, okay, this goes back to basics, but I think it's worth emphasizing again. When you are in the red zone, the defense by trade is on top of you, okay? You no longer have the whole field to operate. So if you have dreams of grandeur, that you're just going to throw fades and these glamorous pass plays, you're living in a non-realistic world. You have to be able to run the football because that's the best way to operate in tight spaces. And John, I've seen this story play out forget the Giants. Dallas was miserable in 2024 in the red zone because they couldn't run the football. When Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers, would move the football and then get in the red zone, all of a sudden it would disappear. Why? Because they couldn't pound the football. So this has been problematic for multiple franchises, but that was the glaring issue for the Giants in game number 1. And yes, it went well beyond the red zone, You ran the ball for a relatively high volume of plays. You only walked away with 74. Russ was responsible for 44. That means your conventional backs had 30 rushing yards on 15 carries. So
is that
those
not
numbers.
Good? Is that not good?
No, let me go check with the interpreter. I believe it's safe
Pearson,
to say.
can you check that? 2 yards per
carry?
carry?
Get back to us? I think
want
the
better
jury
than
is
that?
still
Okay,
out.
I got you.
Yeah, under those circumstances. So that was the issue with respect to the offense, and look at how active Washington's defense was. And this is why I'm going to give credit to the other franchise. I just want to throw out some numbers. They had 2 sacks. They had 8 quarterback hits, which to me is even more telling. 7 tackles for loss, 6 passes defensed. And then, of course, the limited rushing numbers. Then you look at Washington's offense. And I mentioned, they, I would say, played an incomplete game, despite the fact that they put together 3 good touchdown drives. I did some tallying. I want to read you through, John. These were 2nd and 3rd and long downs that the Commanders had throughout the game. They had a 2nd and 16, they had a 2nd and 19, they had a 2nd and 10, a 3rd and 12, a 2nd and 10, a 3rd and 11, a 2nd and 17, and a 2nd and 15. Now, that's a high volume of plays where you would say, boy, good for the Giants defense, right?
Well, when you have a million penalties and you're the Commanders, that's how you get into those situations.
But you're going to take that if you're the Giants defense.
Oh, you would think.
You've put the offense in a precarious spot. And then you look at 2nd and 16, Washington picked up 16 yards. On the 2nd and 19, 13 yards. 2nd and 10, 11 yards. 3rd and 12, a 21-yard gain. 2nd and 10, a 9-yard gain. 3rd and 11, 10 yards. 2nd and 17, 12. 2nd and 15, 15 yards. So a few of them they converted.
Wow.
And then the others, they set up either manageable 3rd downs or they gave Dan Quinn an opportunity to debate, do I keep my offense on the field for 4th down, or do we bring out the punting unit? That is the problematic area that I saw out of week 1 for the defensive side. And Washington also had a very good day on the ground, which was something we talked about in the offseason, had to be cleaned up. And we know the Commanders are going to throw a multitude of different backs with different styles, but even if you want to say, well, the big run for 40-plus yards at the end padded the numbers, I wouldn't go so far.
It did, though.
But there was toughness that Washington was running with throughout the game.
The way I put it yesterday is that you had the Daniel scrambles and the run at the end.
Yep.
That definitely inflated the number. That doesn't mean that the Giants' rush defense was good. It just means it maybe wasn't as bad as the 220 yards might indicate that it was.
And that's fine. I guess I'm more of context. Like, I saw a few runs where Eckler, he'd pick up a hard 3rd
Oh, no,
down,
100%.
right? Because
No.
it was so elusive.
Lance,
so
the rush
timing,
defense was not good enough.
Yeah.
100%.
And it was more of the timing as opposed to the numbers. What do I always say about takeaways? Takeaways are great. It's all about what you do with them, and it's no different than penalties. Penalties, we could sit here till we're blue in the face, John. We can overanalyze them. It's when you pick up the penalty. Not the fact, don't tell me your team had 12 penalties. Tell me when those 12 occurred, which could have been detrimental to the well-being of your team. So I think that, in summary, were the 2 main culprits on offense and on defense that I saw at week 1.
201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K racing kids run presented by Quest on Sunday, October 26th, 9 a.m. MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative t-shirt. After the race, stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at Giants.com/5K. The Giants Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. All right, let's go to the phones at 201-939-4513. We'll take your YouTube comments as well, if they're constructive. And we'll go to Rich. Rich, you're going to lead us off today. Rich, how are you?
Thank you, John. Hello, John and Lance. Welcome back, Lance.
What's up, Rich?
Always enjoy your banter. I want your thoughts, honest thoughts, and I realize you're paid about the Giants. Is there an organizational problem in the personnel department? You are what your record is. But besides that, in recent history, what's concerning even more is the lack of competitiveness. Now, I just looked at the offensive line report. the three guys that are in the middle are lackluster at best. And let's face it, Joe Shane, even DG and Jerry Reese, they have tried to fix this offensive line for 10 years. For whatever reason, either through the draft or free agency, they had just not hit. So it's a tremendous trend, a very negative trend. Additionally, Lance just pointed out, why can't the Giants score in the red zone? Because they can't block. They have no push. They can't protect the quarterback. So anybody, with common sense, you build your teams to the trenches. And my concern is that personnel department, Joe Shane revamped it. He brought in his guys. He got rid of antiquated technology from Gettleman, and I know that. But proof's in the pudding, and it's very frustrating to see the same old stuff, as fans. And even more concerning is the continued trend of lack of competitiveness. We didn't expect a great season this year, but we as fans, and I'm sure you are, we were looking for an increase in competitiveness. So I want to get your thoughts on that, honest thoughts, please.
No, Rich, fair question. Appreciate the call. The way I look at it is pretty simple. The offensive line was not good enough in week one. They clearly did not meet expectations. They did not play as well as I thought they were going to play. And Greg Van Roten played pretty well last year when he was on the field for the Giants. He did not play well in that game in week one. Is that a sign of things to come? I don't know. I'm not going to make a summary judgment of a player that I saw play pretty well last year after one game in 2025. John Runyon obviously had a season cut short last year due to injury. He was fine last year. John Michael Schmitz, we want to see take that next step. We've talked about where he needs to improve.
And stay healthy.
Specifically with the power and the strength. There were too many times that he still kind of got pushed back into the backfield in that game. And look, you're not wrong. The Giants have had an offensive line issue going back to 2013 when Eli Manning started getting the beat out of him on a regular basis. And they've tried a million different ways to try to fix that situation. They tried drafting players. They've tried bringing veterans. They've tried drafting players again. Then they tried bringing in veterans again. They've gone through cycles here. This front office has tried to go about it more through the veteran route than through the draft pick route. Though John Michael Schmitz is the draft pick. Jermaine Illuminor, I think, has been a pretty big success at right tackle. I think he's done an excellent job. I've said this in the offseason. I'll say it again. If they want to give him a contract extension, I'm all for that. I think he's been great. He's a good leader. He's a good player. And look, you want to see the rest of the guys do better because, especially with a shorter quarterback like Russell Wilson, you need to have better interior protection. And I think we saw that at times last year. Was it consistent every game? No. Was it consistent enough in the running game every week? No. But again, once you're, have your backup quarterbacks in, teams are not going to let you run the football. Like, that's just the way teams adjust their game plans, Lance. We see this. When people ask me about fantasy football, and this is not, it's fantasy football, I get it. But when people say, hey, John, how do you figure out what running backs to draft? I go, I find the running backs that have the best quarterbacks. Because I think running backs are driven by the quarterback position. Because if teams have to respect the passing game, then they're not going to be able to stack the box against the run. If a team doesn't, respect your quarterback, they're going to stack the box against the run, and they're going to make you throw the football. That's just the way it goes, right? So I don't want to go nuts about the end of last year because, the Giants, once they moved on from Daniel Jones, they were cycling through backup quarterbacks. It happens. But that group needs to play better. And I like the way Joe Shane evaluates players. I've been a big fan of their draft classes, and I've said that on draft days, before I've seen these guys hit the field. And you can go back and listen to what I've said about the players the Giants have drafted before they drafted them. So you can say, oh, Schmeelk, of course you like the draft picks. You work for the team. Well, I was talking about the players before the Giants drafted them, and I like the players. So I like the way this team looks at players and evaluates them. Like, even going back to the John Michael Schmitz draft class, Lance, we talked about this that offseason. We had fans calling up wanting to draft him in the first round. And me and you sat here and said, you don't really want to draft a center that high. You could probably wait. What did they do? They waited. They got him in the second round. We all thought that was an excellent value pick. Marcus Bowe this year, I had him as a third-round player. They got him in the fifth round. So I feel like they've done well evaluating these players. Rich, to your point, and I'm not arguing it, the results have not been there yet. And you can't run from results. They are what they are. But I do believe in the way they look at players and evaluate them. I think a lot of it makes sense. I think they're very thorough. I think they do a good job. But the results need to be better, and we all know that. Sorry for the long answer.
In years past, I think, because the last caller was going into the archives a little bit. I think you could also point to, and this is not an excuse, this is just how things played out, really some of these rookies and players not staying healthy, I thought killed the Giants' offensive line or the chances of that group being competitive because, I mean, every year, John, we've been talking about the Giants up there in the most combinations on the offensive line, and that's going to kill a team, whether you think highly of the personnel or you have questions. Now, what's different about week one here is that there was continuity. With the exception of Andrew Thomas, most of the guys were back that played last year. So you would have thought, okay, there's familiarity, there's comfort, there's so forth. But here's the other thing that I talk about every single year. And I say this because there's a lot of people that consume football and they think that, well, while your team appeared to get better on paper, everybody else around you is getting worse or not doing anything. No, that was not the case.
Everyone drafts and adds players.
And
you're right about that.
What Washington did, okay, and that's why I keep emphasizing that franchise also deserves a lot of credit, whether Giants fans want to hear it or not. They went out and they brought in brand new personnel to put with Daron Payne because the Commanders could not stop the run last season, and this was a team that the Giants saw 2 times, so that's why this is important to highlight here, okay? And they brought in Javon Kinlaw.
He did a great job, by the way.
And they brought in Eddie Goldman, who is a massive human being, and they brought in Dietrich Wise.
I thought Dietrich Wise was
I thought he had the game of his life.
I thought he was great in that game.
And not just necessarily hitting the quarterback. And there was a play where he forced Russell Wilson to have the sidearm throw, if you remember.
And I believe he was also the player that prevented him on one of the play actions in those red zones plays you were talking about. They were trying to Tracy in the flat. I think he was the one that cut that angle off and didn't allow him to throw that pass.
So, I mean, those are 3 guys that were not on the team last year. Not to mention Marshawn Lattimore, who they acquired at the trade deadline last year, who only played 2 games due to injury. So,
and Von Miller, by the way.
Von Miller's another one who was in the rotation. So the point is, the Giants' offensive line also saw very new people that they were not exposed to last year. This is, once again, I can't emphasize this enough. This is not an excuse. This is the reality of football. So for those saying, oh, well, the Giants are just rolling over everybody, they should be able to handle Washington, they saw a completely new defensive front. Okay, and then you add in Bobby Wagner and Frankie Luvo, who were returning, who were playing behind
and they're good
those
players.
New guys,
they're
who are solid players. Yeah. So that Washington defense is very different and very good. And I think that also was a big reason why the Giants, you want to say it was a rude awakening or something that they weren't exposed to last season. However, once again, you want to talk about it, it's important to add that context. And
I will say this,
it's going to get even more challenging, though.
Let's see what this Commanders defense looks against other teams, too. But I think that's going to be key, right? Is this,
it's one game.
Are they really that good, or did the Giants just not play well? That's something that we have to look at, too.
No, and that's fair. I guess the way that I look at it is, and I even tweeted about this, there is an identity of Dan Quinn's defense throughout his history.
Which, by the way, gave the Giants a lot of trouble when he was in Dallas, too.
Correct. And there are certain, stylistically speaking, players that are a great fit for him, John. And what I saw yesterday, I saw those players assume what he wants out of a unit. So that's why I feel pretty good that this wasn't an outlier that we saw against the Giants. It's going to be an attitude and just a philosophy that they're going to adopt moving forward. But in fairness, nobody's saying that Washington's going to get 8 quarterback hits and 2 sacks every single week, but I just think that he's got better command of his roster than when he walked in with Adam Peters. Remember, they were inheriting everything from the previous regime. Now you have an additional offseason. You get to fine-tune things, and I think that's the product that we're seeing right now.
201-939-4513. Don't forget, go check out the Giants Huddle podcast. A lot of great episodes up there. Draft season's going up today. We have the rapid reaction from over the weekend. New episode of Giants Hangout this week with another guest on Thursday. And then trying to get Marshawn Lattimore for our player interview on Friday. So make sure you check that out in the Giants Huddle podcast, Giants YouTube channel, Giants.com/podcast, Giants app, or just find it on your favorite podcast platform. Just search for Giants Huddle podcast or Giants Podcast Network. 201-939-4513. Taking your calls. Have an open line. Andrew in Virginia is up next. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, guys. It's been a long time. I don't call in that much anymore, but when I do, I do have something to say. Lance, you did a great job of breaking this down. John, you did a great job with Paul yesterday. I'm not going to get into the tangibles about why fans are frustrated and it looks like the same old thing yet again. Great segment. Earlier, you just covered all the offensive line issues. I live down here in Virginia. Washington turned over their roster in basically 1 year. last year.
Yep.
All right, they are a good team. We had the opportunity to hire both those guys, didn't do it. Whatever. All right, they have adults running the team now. Last time I called in, my message was, we're sick of this brand of football. I'm not blaming one person. It's not Jones. It's not coach, whatever. There's an attitude problem on this team, and we now have guys that showed you the spark, like a Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw, or like a Jeremy Shockey, and we're only seeing glimpses of these guys play the game. They have the potential to be tone setters. We're not maximizing it. We saw Elijah Chapman as a fullback blow guys completely out of the play multiple times. He wasn't elevated. What could he have done with 2 snaps in the red zone? That's 14 points.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, Andrew, you don't know that. You don't know if that would have turned into 14 points.
You know what I'm saying, though.
Right.
Give him the opportunity. The guy is a fire starter. He clearly wants to bleed blue and show it for all the fans. We want him to do that as fans. Cam Scatterbo, he had a Jeremy Shockey-like play in his limited amount of snaps. That guy could be a fire starter for the entire organization going forward. Let's see it. I love Wandell. He's getting suplexed out there, man. We need a better, consistent, third down player. We need an imposing receiver out there. We need someone who can block better if we're going to try to run the ball more. Okay? We're not putting the right pieces together out there, and it is the same old story. It doesn't look like anything has changed, and it's very, very frustrating as fans to get all psyched, see seam passes all preseason long, great throws, deep balls, and then have it not show up on opening day for
but
the
Andrew,
third
listen,
time in a row.
let me just jump in here. I don't mean to cut you off. It's why John and I, we had multiple shows during training camp, and we said, stop putting a lot of substance in preseason results. Okay? And listen, Andrew, as you documented, you've been watching football for some time. So, I mean, you should learn that you can't – I'm not telling you not to get excited. I get it. But to say that the throws were great when you're going up against second and third tier players, it's not conducive to what week 1 is all about. Week 1 is the men, okay? What we see in training camp, not to be disrespectful, is the boys. Okay, and you grow up quickly. It's the same thing where we say guys are running around in their underwear during the spring or at the combine. Well, how about put some pads on? And then we see, what guys are all about. So I don't put anything up high on a scale simply because it looked visually optimistic out of training camp or preseason games. I really don't think that told us much of anything other than just evaluating some individual players and seeing maybe where they fit in here moving forward.
Well, you might be right in that preseason is really a lack of an indicator. We led everyone in points, right? And now we're in the bottom 3 in points yet again. So you might have a point in that preseason does not dictate what's going to happen in the regular season. But the fans also have a point. At what point do we expect to be able to score the football? At what point do we expect to have the kind of team that the last several head coaches have said we were going to have?
Andrew.
All the way back to Ben McAdoo.
Andrew, no one here has said that fans shouldn't be frustrated. We share and understand your frustration. Absolutely. We hear you. No argument.
So all I'm saying is put the guys out there that are going to provide that spark. Don't give us this finesse, non-Giants football crap. We want to see New York Giants championship-level players attempting to make those plays for this new regime. And you have them, and they're not being used.
Well, Andrew,
Abdul Carter did not play enough. Cam Scatterbo did not play enough. We're not attacking defenses at all. We're not doing anything. It looks like we're basically – it's a miracle if we get a first down. You can't go 0-7 from the 2-yard line. You can't do that.
No, Andrew, look. We thank you for the call.
Yeah, no one's disputing that.
We get it.
Yeah.
We understand the frustration. Total snaps, if you count special teams involved, including Abdul Carter played 3 fewer snaps than Brian Burns. 3 fewer snaps. They're going to rotate the edge rushers more. Brian Burns played 67% of the snaps. Kayvon Thibodeau played 74% of the snaps. Abdul Carter played 54% of the snaps. It was 55 total snaps for Thibodeau, 48 total snaps for Burns, 43 total snaps for Carter. That doesn't surprise me. Like, if you'd have told me week 1 that Thibodeau and Burns played more snaps than Abdul Carter, that would not have surprised me in week 1.
I mean, he's a rookie. It's his first game.
Correct.
Plus, he also played 5 on special teams, which Dable pointed out, too.
I saw a lot of people, and I include
and he had the block punt.
And I include the special teams in my total.
Oh, you did? Okay, I didn't
total.
realize that.
No, that's okay.
Gotcha.
But it's the first week. Abdul Carter's going to play plenty. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
He's going to be out there on the field. He's going to get plenty of snaps. But look, I don't think you're going to have those edge rushers playing 80% of the snaps. They want to spread those out a little bit because you want the guys fresh at the end of the game. Because in theory, if you want to lead, if you have a lead, you want a good fourth quarter pass rush. I guess my point, Andrew, is that I don't think the changes you're talking about changed the result of that game in week 1. Like, I don't think, like, if Elijah Chapman's the fullback, does that stop Marcus Bowe from missing his block, turning around, and running into Cam Scadaboo at the goal line? I don't know if that changes that. You know, Cam Scadaboo did get some opportunities. He had, -2 rushing yards? Whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't much of anything.
Not to say
-3.
Not to say they could not provide a spark or they couldn't help, but that to me is not. And Wando Robinson in the slot, I thought he was arguably the Giants' best receiver in that game. He had 2 or 3 huge third down conversions on their long drive that led to the field goal in the first half. I get what you're saying. I'm just not sure the solutions that you threw out there would actually fix the problems that you're describing, which are all, by the way, fair problems. No one's arguing with the problems. The issue is how you fix them.
Well, just to expand on what you were going to say, and I was going to say this to the last caller, his point was, putting maybe tougher wide receivers out on the field who could help with blocking. Who exactly did they not play in week 1?
It would be Bo Collins. That would be the guy.
But Bo Collins is an undrafted rookie.
I'm just
who
telling
was
you.
used a little on special. I mean, let's not.
Lance, I don't disagree
I'm
with
not, pounding you.
But I'm just that would be the guy. Or if
you
want to elevate little Jordan Humphrey, would be the other guy.
He's got a little bit more size. I get that, but hasn't necessarily had a track record to be known as a blocker throughout his career.
I mean,
He's
Jalen Hyatt's
player.
not going there inserting blocks on safeties.
And Gunnar Olszewski is not going there either.
Correct.
So you're limited in terms of your choices. I get the frustration, and frustration leads to, all right, let's look at the roster and see who could be put in, but I don't see another wide receiver.
Your best players have to play better.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
I mean,
that's it.
Well, and the other thing is, and I'm going to give the coaching staff the benefit of the doubt here too, which I think is important to understand going into week 1. They've been around these players all throughout camp, in the meetings. You want to talk about if we get to week 8 or 9 and you want to call for a player to play a little bit more because there's been enough of a sample size in the regular season, I'll hear you out a little bit more.
Even week 5 or week 6.
Okay, if you want to go earlier.
Give me a month.
But week 1 to argue that they don't know who is going to perform at a high level based on what they've been analyzing during camp and the preseason, I find that very hard to believe. And also knowing not to overload a rookie like Scadaboo and Abdul Carter right out of the gates because they're still getting comfortable. I don't look at that as something that would have made a huge difference if you would have given Scadaboo 5 more snaps. You would have given Abdul Carter 8 more snaps. I mean, are we really talking about we're flipping the script that much more? I don't see it. Whether it's a hypothetical conversation or a realistic conversation, I just don't see it coming to fruition.
And you beat me to the punch when you were talking about preseason. I said this on the post-game show with Tiki on Sunday. I did not say it yesterday, but I'll say it here. I'm putting a moratorium, or just putting an end to, in the preseason games, they did this.
Yeah.
Done. Guys, we said it at the time, and we said it at the time for a reason because we believed it to be true. Nothing that happens in preseason games are predictive of success in the regular season. It's almost 2 completely different sports. Now, can you judge how individual players might do in certain situations, how they do in one-on-one matchups against good players? Sure. The idea that team success in preseason games matters has just been proven false a million times over the years. Are there some cases or teams where it has translated? Yes. But to call it predictive? No, it is not. So I know you guys got all excited about it. If we get a call and it's like, well, they did this in the preseason, they should be doing it well now. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. Most of the guys that were doing that in the preseason aren't even out there on the field.
Yeah, they're not even on the roster anymore, or they're on the practice squad.
Or the guys that were facing aren't on the roster or the field either. So,
and here's the other thing, and this is the most critical aspect of everything when it comes to the preseason. These teams are not game planning, okay? When we hear the term vanilla, and I know it's cliche, well, it's true. Nobody is staying up late at night saying, how do we stop Jackson Dart in the second quarter of preseason game number 2 so we don't look silly, okay? They want to throw these guys out into the deep end of the pool to see how they react.
and by the way,
That's the whole gist of this.
it's not just us saying this. You know who else said this? Brian Dable.
Yeah.
After preseason games, in media availabilities during the week, he told you the same thing. He told you the same thing. So let's just keep that in mind as we move forward here.
One other thing that I just wanted to say, you know, just to further put a bow on this conversation, it reminds me of preseason accomplishments and people that, you know, want to run around and get excited over it, and that's fine, to each their own. But it's almost like the equivalency of a participation trophy in Little League, okay, which we live in a day and time, right? Everybody's got to go home with a trophy. Are you really going to get that excited over a 6th or 7th place finish in Little League? So why are we all of a sudden campaigning that 30 points per game in the preseason is an accomplishment that's going to mean something, or that it automatically triggers something in the long run? It's good in that moment to feel great. All right, your team won. You like the results. What you sat down and watched for 3 hours was interesting, was exciting. That's fine. But then it should end. The minute the game concludes, it's over. Okay? It's a clean slate. It doesn't mean much of anything. And that's why I associate the participation trophy. I think people are trying to hold on to things to make them feel good, but it's this ultra reality and there's no truth behind it.
All right, let's go back to the phones at 201-939-4513. But first, a reminder, join us at the Ultimate New York Giants Women's Tailgate presented by Joe Malone, September 28th at 10 a.m. to noon, right before the Giants game against the Chargers in Lot G. Attendees will have the opportunity to connect with Madeline Burke, some Giants legends. There'll be a merchandise shop, a Kendra Scott activation, tailgate games, giveaways, photos, DJs, and more. It is a ticketed event. You have to be 21 or over, and tailgate food and 1 drink is included with the ticket purchase. All right, I want to go to Pearson. You're going to kick out of this. So Wilson in Roxbury, he called. You bring him up. He called our postgame show after the game on Sunday. And Wilson, I don't want to dig into this because we're in very limited time on the postgame show. How do you know Tiki Barber? What's up? How do you know Tiki Barber exactly? What, did you work on his car? Explain this to me, please.
I was in the car wash business for many years.
Okay.
So I had a car wash on Route 17 in Carlstadt. And Tiki, Keith Hamilton, Jason Seahorn, they were all my clients. Actually, Mr. Mara, Wellington Mara, he used to come in and to the car wash, and I met his driver. Oh, we go way back. But Tiki and I, listen, not only was he a great player, he's actually a better person. I mean, we had lunch together many times. It was.
You had lunch with Tiki Barber?
So when I asked him that question, because I have some history with him,
Wait, hold on a minute. I got to clarify this. You have lunch with Tiki Barber, so you wash his car and then he takes you out for lunch? I have to understand the logistics of this.
There was a pizzeria next door to the car where you used to have a slice of pizza.
Oh, okay. See, that's why context. Wilson hates context. He couldn't care less about context. Like, he'll tell you, oh, yeah, we drove 10 miles away from the car wash and we sat down and had a
4-course meal.
100. They also brought dessert. He paid for it. Meanwhile, he walks 3 steps in to get a slice. And probably Wilson was like, hovering over him and, asking him 75 different questions.
No, actually, Lance, believe it or not, we never talk about football ever. When Tiki
I got to commend you for that.
Wilson,
that is tremendous on your part.
Good self-control on your part. I'm very impressed.
Why don't you follow that philosophy when it comes to this program and never talking football? That's the better question.
Let me tell you something.
We can talk car wash.
You have to separate business and you have to separate business and sports. I'm sure Tiki didn't want to talk about football on a Wednesday afternoon.
All right, so Wilson, real quick, I have a question for you. Like the undercoating and like the stuff you put on the wheels to like prevent the rust. Does that stuff work, or is that all nonsense?
It does work, Johnny. It does work.
Okay.
Listen, I'm not in that business anymore. But yes, all that stuff does work. Especially since you're big time. I'm sure you have a really expensive.
Oh
car,
yes,
so
my 4-door 2018 Honda Civic definitely needs some waxing and some like special shine on my like factory rims. Trust me.
Wilson's really trying to kiss the you-know-what on this program.
Oh no, he was
goodness.
he was oozing with sarcasm in that comment. Are you kidding me?
Hey, listen, I'm sure you didn't think about the show going this far off the rails.
Oh, Wilson, I love this. Okay, anyway, what do you have on the team, Wilson?
No, when
Go
you
ahead.
call, it's actually expected, but go ahead, yeah.
But listen, all kidding aside, listen, I didn't want to tell you this, but a lot of people, right, text me before and ask me, Wilson, you calling today? I say, hey, I'm going to call today because they like my craziness, so it's actually kind of funny.
Can you give me all their numbers so I can consult and advise them accordingly?
I'm not doing but what Johnny?
Pearson, is that you? Are you texting
they
Wilson?
have a little issue with Lance, and I want to get to that before I get
beautiful. All right, good. See, this is great. In the post game, I let Wilson talk to Tiki. I got out of the way. Now I can get away again and let him talk to Lance. Go ahead, Wilson. It's all you.
No. They have an issue with Lance of what he told me last week. And Lance,
what did I say last week?
Well, you told me that I put a lot of my emotions into all the stuff that we.
Yeah, I remember that.
We make decisions up on with emotions.
Sure.
So all the buddies that are listening right now, they told me to tell you this. When I go to somebody's house, right, or they come to my house and we go to my game room downstairs and we're having a beer, right, Lance, and we watch the game.
Okay,
right?
well, the car wash business must be good.
We don't tell each other, hey, don't worry about it if we lose by 30, by 40, guys. Don't worry about it, because we have to look at the big picture. No fan, Lance, watches the game like that. When we sit down in front of the TV, we expect to win. Otherwise, why bother watching the game?
No, I completely understand that, and I'm not disputing that. What I'm saying is that when it rolls over to you thinking that front office executives and coaches should make decisions with your emotion, that's where I can't relate. Okay? There's a distinct difference between the two. You can feel that way, and you're entitled to feel that way.
And you should feel that way. You're a fan.
But front office personnel and coaches cannot think like that because then they would be making bad decisions with no reasoning behind it. That's my point.
Fine. Okay, and that's fair. But Lance, eventually, front offices and owners, when there's like five people on the stands in the middle of December because you are horrendous, eventually though they have to take the pulse of the fans with their consideration because as much as I've said this before, and I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to get into the game real quick. There's only one problem that I have with all this stuff because whether they win the game or lose the game, it's not relevant anymore. But you know what I do have a problem with it, Johnny, is this.
No, I'm back.
Good. Now he wants to talk to you.
Remember? The game was 14-6, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't a close game. I told Tiki this, and you remember. It was like Wednesday practice for Washington. They didn't take the Giants seriously whatsoever.
Well, Wilson. First of all,
if they really wanted to play the game the right way, Johnny, we would have lost by 30.
No, Wilson. Look, I think one thing you said was wrong. I think the Commanders took the game very seriously and they played very hard and they took it seriously. But look, the Commanders could have been up a lot more than they were at halftime between a couple of drop passes and the missed deep pass that Lance mentioned from Daniels to McLaurin. I agree with that. And I also agree that despite the score being 14-6, you never got the feeling or sense watching the game that it was as close as the score indicated. Yeah. I think that's fair. I also agree with that.
And I had even alluded to that earlier when we were going over the game. Yeah, I would agree with you.
Okay.
See, Wilson, we're finding a lot of consensus here. I feel like this has been a very productive phone call so far.
No, but because Johnny, listen, I didn't want. There's one thing that I don't want all the callers. Some callers they don't like me, some callers like me. But at the end of the day, it's all sports, man, right? So we're just having fun.
Well, so we're here to have fun. Exactly right.
But when I have to hear, because as much as I love Glenn from Maryland, because he always has my back. On year four of this head coach and this general manager, because now I've heard all summer that this is Joe Shane's roster, is Joe Shane's vision. A year 4 of this head coach general manager combo, I cannot hear Glenn telling me that we are years away, that we ways off for being competitive. That cannot be. That cannot happen. I'm sorry. If that's the case, Johnny, and I don't want people to think that I because I don't know these individuals. At the end of the day, this is a business. You're in the business of winning football games. You could be the greatest guy in the world, but if you don't win, you're going to pay the consequences, because at the end of the day, you can be Mother Teresa, but if you don't win games, you're not going to be around.
Wilson. 100% correct. Thank you very much for the call.
Okay.
No, you're right.
I don't know if Mother Teresa would make a good coach, but that's a whole other
And
topic.
and I'm not even referencing job security stuff. I'm not talking about that. The team has to look better than they did in week 1 the rest of the year. Like, that can't continue. Like, everyone knows that. The coaches know that. Joe Shane knows that. They scored 6 points. They didn't score a touchdown. It has to be better. If you want to win any games this year, it has to be better. It has to be. You can't gain 230 yards of offense and score 6 points and no touchdowns. I'm not breaking any news here. Brian Dable knows this. Joe Shane knows this. Mr. Barrett knows this. They scored 6 points and gained 230 yards. Yeah, of course it has to get better. No crap. I mean, come on. I'm not breaking any news here. Yeah, it's got to get better, Wilson. Regardless of what year it is of the regime. But yeah, look, this goes back to Andrew in Virginia, I think it was. Is that what it called? Andrew in Virginia,
yeah.
I think. Yeah, it looked way too much like the last 2 years where they averaged 16 and 15 points per game. You're not going to win any games averaging 16 and 15 points per game. Everyone here knows that. Brian Dable knows that. Russell Wilson knows that. These guys have been in the league for 2 decades, 3 decades in Brian Dable's case. I'm not saying anything that's crazy. They know this. They know. Wilson, trust me. They know. It's driving Brian Dable nuts that they came out and scored 6 points in that game. It's driving him bonkers. Trust me. And yeah, it's got to get better. Of course it does. Otherwise, you mentioned the ownership has to take into consideration if there are 5 people in the building and they're playing terrible and losing games. Yeah, do they care that there's 5 people in the building, which is never going to happen because Giant fans are awesome? Yeah, they would care about that. But they care more about the fact that the team's playing bad and they're losing games. That's what matters. And if the product's bad to the fact that the fans don't want to show up, that's what matters. And that's what matters to Brian Dable, and that's what matters to Joe Shane. So yeah, week 1 was bad. The good news is you got 16 more of these games coming up. And you got another game in the division coming up, and now in just 5 days. Right around the corner. Here we go. Dallas Cowboys. Is it an easy game? No. Do you have to play a lot better? Yes. Are they going to? I don't know. I would hope so, but I don't have a crystal ball in front of me here. I don't know. My head might look like one, but it doesn't work that way. So I don't know what else to say besides that.
Well, listen, just to emphasize some of the points that you had brought up, Brian Dable, he's been through this numerous times throughout the course of his career. He's also seen a lot of different developments with various different offenses. But I think the point that I was emphasizing is he's not staying up late at night and reading social media clippings about whether or not there should be a change of quarterback and that determining what he's going to implement entering week 2. I think that's where we're getting at. That, yes, there is the business of football where there are economics involved and fan support. We're not naive, but there has to be a line drawn where you say, we had a plan in the offseason. Okay, we invested in certain players, and we're going to stick to that plan, and we're not going to all of a sudden pull a 180 after one bad result. And I get it, the results are not encouraging, and we're not sitting here and saying that it's going to get 10 times better next week or saying that they're going to be able to flip the switch, because it's hard to do that in football, even though you play different opponents and results can be different. But you've got a Dallas team that you have to travel to this week that lost a heartbreaker to Philadelphia that I thought looked a little bit better especially on defense, than I had anticipated.
I thought they actually played pretty well.
I thought they played really
you.
good in the second half when they kept Philadelphia in check. And their offense, we expected with Dak back and now George Pickens. And I thought the offensive line played a lot better, in previous years. So, this is a team that's just as irritated and just as hungry because they lost their first game. So there's no picnic when it comes to the division, but it comes down to the simple philosophy of you are not going to be competitive and you are not going to put yourself in a position to win football games when you don't win up front on both sides of the ball. Okay? It may be a boring answer to a lot of you. It may not have the interest and appeal because you want to hear more and you're yearning for answers, but that's the bottom line. The Giants did not win in the trenches against the Commanders, and they're now going to go up against a team that I thought played well in both of those areas. And if we're going to sit here from a week from now going over this game and the results are similar, I will guarantee you that you could point your finger at play up front as a good indicator as to where that game goes on Sunday.
4 things. Run the ball, stop the run, protect your passer, get their quarterback. That's it. If you could do 3 of those 4 things, you're probably going to win the darn game. We'll see if the Giants can do that. Let's wrap things up with Richard in Florida. Richard, what's going on?
Hey, guys. Long-time Giant fan. Long-time. Old guy. Couple things.
Would you like to date yourself? How old are we talking about, Richard?
I'm a young 74.
Oh, okay. Hey. Absolutely.
But watched it with my father, and anyway, I always say that the worst thing, the only bad thing in my personality is I'm a Giant fan, but my wife will always disagree with me. There's a lot more. So here's the deal. Let's forget about the preseason, because if I remember correctly, didn't we go to playoffs or Super Bowl or something when we lost all the games in preseason?
Sure.
Yeah, I remember
that. I think that's number one. Yeah, I remember that one.
That's all you need to know. Sure.
But the big thing that you just described to that gentleman over the phone about the offensive and defensive line, I think every football team tries to do that. So here we are. Do we have the personnel to do that? And if we do we have the coaching to implement those new gains, the new offense, the new defense? If we don't have the personnel, it means that the coaches and the staff didn't do a good job picking the personnel. If we do have the personnel, that means that the coaches aren't right and the GM isn't right. I want to know what you guys feel about that. And my last thing is, my case in point is Daniel Jones. I was like, get rid of the guy. And I always knew in the back of my head he had no time to throw the ball. And you guys know, if you don't have any time to throw the ball, you can't be a good quarterback in the league. So I'd like you to mention, why do you think that Daniel Jones had a good game? And do you agree with me about the personnel versus the coaching staff?
No, I appreciate the call. And look, that's what eventually what you have to figure out, right? Like, are the players you have here, are they good enough? And I think a lot of them are, to be honest with you. They just have to execute better. Then again, if they don't execute better, then you get back, well, maybe they aren't as good as we thought. So I think that's something that will reveal itself as we go along. I do like Brian Dable and his coaching staff. Like I know, like Andre Patterson's a really good defensive line coach. I know that he is. He's been doing this in this league for 30 years.
Did a great job with the Vikings.
I'm pretty darn sure Carmen Brasil is a good offensive line coach. He learned under Dante Scarnecchia.
Patriots, yeah.
And he did a really good job when he was in Vegas. I'm pretty sure he's a darn good offensive coach.
And he's responsible, for Jermaine Illuminor's development, too.
Correct.
Let's not forget.
Mike Kafka is getting interviews from teams and requests for interviews left and right. Like, I'm pretty sure Mike Kafka is a good coach. So I can keep going if you want. But look, this is something that we're going to figure out this year. And we're going to see how these players play and how they eventually, figure things out. By the way, Giants were 1-3 and 2-2 in their 2 Super Bowl years in the preseason. I looked that up. But Lance, I think that's something that's going to reveal itself. And I think to sum this up, and I think he had a second point, which I'm forgetting now.
Well, Daniel Jones was the second point, which we can get to, yeah.
And I will get to that in a second. But don't jump to conclusions after 1 week. Let's get a little bit of a larger sample here, see what we're looking at, and then we can start having some of these conversations that fans want to have after week 1. And I get why you want to have them after week 1, because you're carrying over what you saw from the last 2 years into this year because it looked so similar, but it's a different team. you evaluate each team 1 year at a time. This team is much different than last year's team. All right, so you got to give it a little more time. Got to give it a little more space. Some of the individual players you might be forming harder opinions on. I understand that, and we'll see how the next few weeks go, and we'll see where we're at. And you want to add to that before I get to DJ?
The only thing I wanted to add was, and I mean, I'll say my opinion right now when it comes to at least the defensive front, I think the Giants have talent there. Okay?
And in the secondary, for that matter. Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland and Tyler Nubin, and I believe in those guys.
Sure,
Drew
but
Phillips.
I just want to focus on the trenches because that's what the caller's point was. I do think they have the personnel, but when it comes to teams that could get after the quarterback, and we saw some flashes of that. Brian Burns had 2 really nice plays, and Thibodeau and Abdul Carter, were closing in. But that's great. If you can't stop the run, though, it really eats away at the effectiveness of what those guys do at pass rush.
By the way, if you can't get a lead and score offensively, it does too.
You're limited too because
Both.
now you're not in favorable downs and distances to be effective.
Well, and teams could run play action, and all that stuff.
But there are, John, we've seen this in the NFL. There are a lot of teams that have good defensive fronts, a lot of talent, all-pro guys because they're so good at getting in the quarterback's vicinity, but teams run all over them. And I think there's this touch and go, feel it out type of process still going on with this personnel grouping that as talented as they are, the run defense is the one facet that could hold them back if that doesn't get corrected, which was the Achilles heel last season. And that's what I think is hovering over that group.
And on the offensive line, the guys have to come together and play better. I thought Jermaine Alumura did a nice job in week 1. I thought he did a nice job last year too, but the interior guys did not play well in week 1. They had to come out and do better in week 2.
Because he can't block everybody.
Correct.
It's the same thing, by the way, Andrew Thomas didn't play. I don't want to hear, well, Andrew Thomas comes back and everything's great.
And Paul, actually, that was the first thing he said on the show yesterday.
And we did not consult, by the way.
No.
So I don't want him to get credit that he's influencing what I have to say and vice versa.
And
but anyway, go ahead.
And now really quickly on the Daniel Jones thing. 1, it's week 1 against a Miami team that looks like they could be in for a very long season.
Not pretty.
So keep that in mind. The opponent matters. We say that every week on this show. And number 2, look, he's got a really good offensive line in front of him. Jonathan Taylor's not Saquon Barkley, but he's really good. And they don't have a superstar wide receiver, but they have a bunch of really good players, a tight end and wide receiver from to throw the ball to. So, again, 1 week, don't go nuts. I'm happy for Daniel. I'm rooting for him, but let's not assume what he does in week 1 against a bad Dolphins, or what looks like a bad Dolphins team, is going to be indicative of what happens the rest of the year.
Listen, the Colts scored, I want to say, on every single possession, I believe.
7 of 7.
So, I mean, that
correct.
is very impressive. I'm sure Shane Steichen is all smiles considering he's feeling the pressure in year 3. The other thing that I would point out, which I think you were hinting at, is with the way the Colts defense performed. I mean, Tua and company, they were turning the ball over like crazy. That was very good, favorable field positioning for Daniel Jones in that offense. And to their credit, they took advantage of it. But we've seen flashes from Daniel Jones even previously.
He's had individual games like this.
I mean, even with the
Not in a
Giants,
while,
he's had
but he had a
games,
couple.
but he's had games where you're like, wow, okay, you see that. So I'd like to see a set of a season. I'd like to see him stay healthy. I do think there are plenty of examples of environment matters. What offense they're in, who they're around. Clearly the offensive line, the wide receivers, the Michael Pittmans and Tyler Warren, and can those guys consistently make plays? And they did yesterday. But let's not get ahead of ourselves to say that Daniel Jones now in Indianapolis is going to run away with things. Just like we're talking about the Giants, you got to see more. I think the same holds true with DJ.
That's Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants, from the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. For Lance Medow, for Pearson Butler, for Caroline, I'm John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time, everybody.